She paid a fortune to outbid the quiet man for a patch of worthless land, never suspecting it held the proof of her father's greatest crime and the only key to the quiet man's revenge. The auction hall smelled of old paper and furniture polish. It was a scent Evelyn Reed associated with the orderly liquidation of assets. A controlled, final process. She found it comforting. She sat in the third row, a stark line of charcoal grey silk, in a room of worn denim and faded flannel. Her presence was a disruption, a note played in the wrong key. She was aware of the sideways glances, the low murmurs that followed the tap of her heels on the warped floorboards. She ignored them. They were data points, nothing more. Her focus was on Lot 37, a parcel of land described in the catalogue as 40 acres of undeveloped timber and rock, known locally as Blackwood's Hollow. It was strategically worthless. No road access, no water rights, nothing but steep grades and second-growth pine. To everyone else in the room, it was a liability. To her, it was the final, irritating piece of a multi-billion-dollar puzzle. Her company, Reed Global, needed it for the access corridor to their new lithium mining project. A project championed by her second-in-command, Marcus Vance. He had assured her acquiring it would be a formality, a footnote in a budget. The auctioneer, a man with a voice like gravel in a barrel, finally arrived at Lot 37. He started the bidding low. A formality. Evelyn did not raise her paddle. She waited. Amateurs bid early. A few local farmers made half-hearted offers, gestures of habit more than intent. The price crawled upward in meager increments. Then, a new bidder entered. A man in the front row raised a numbered paddle. He did it without flourish, a simple, economical motion. He wore a canvas jacket, frayed at the cuffs. His boots were scuffed and coated in a thin layer of pale dust. His hands were clean, but marked with the kind of ingrained lines that spoke of labor, not leisure. He was, to Evelyn's practiced eye, entirely insignificant. Yet he kept bidding. The price passed the land's appraised value. It passed the nuisance value Reed Global had allocated. The local farmers dropped out, shaking their heads. It was just her and the man in the canvas jacket. Evelyn signaled her bid with a slight inclination of her head. The auctioneer, who knew precisely who she was and the depth of the accounts she represented, acknowledged it instantly. The man in the front row raised his paddle again. His face was unreadable. He seemed to be looking at the auctioneer, but his focus felt more distant. He was not playing a game. He was doing a job. Evelyn felt a flicker of annoyance. This was inefficient. A waste of time. She gestured again, a sharper, more definitive nod, doubling her previous increment. The room went silent. It was a city bid. A number that bore no relationship to the soil and rock being sold. It was meant to end the contest. The man's paddle went up again. Slow, deliberate, unflinching. Evelyn studied him now. He was not a proxy. He was not a speculator. There was a stillness about him, a rootedness that felt out of place in the transactional air of the room. He was bidding with his own money. She was certain of it, and it was costing him something. She leaned forward and spoke to the associate beside her, her voice a low murmur. "Who is he?" The associate checked his tablet. Cal Blackwood. His family used to own the land, generations back. Lost it in the Depression. Blackwood, the name of the hollow. It was sentimental then, the most irrational and predictable of motivators. Evelyn settled back in her chair. This was a different kind of negotiation, but the principle was the same. Find the opponent's limit and exceed it. She signaled again, a jump that made the auctioneer pause for a fraction of a second. Cal Blackwood looked over his shoulder then. His eyes met hers. They were grey, clear, and held no animosity. They held nothing at all. It was like looking at a winter sky. He was simply assessing her. A problem. A fact. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A gesture that said, "This is over." He turned back to the front and, for a long moment, did nothing. The auctioneer's patter filled the space. Going once. Going twice. Evelyn prepared to close her portfolio. His paddle went up. Her annoyance solidified into something colder. This was no longer about land. It was about compliance. He was a loose variable in a closed system, and she did not tolerate loose variables. She raised her own paddle this time, held it up. A clear, final statement. She would not be bidding again. This was the last number. It was a number that could have bought half the town. It was an absurdity. The auctioneer looked at Cal Blackwood. Blackwood's shoulders fell, just a fraction of an inch. It was the only sign of defeat. He slowly lowered his paddle to his lap. "Sold," the auctioneer called out, his gavel cracking against the podium. To the lady in the third row. Evelyn closed her portfolio. The transaction was complete. As she was leaving, her path converged with his near the doorway. He stood aside to let her pass, his hands in his pockets. She paused, compelled by an uncharacteristic impulse. She had paid too much. That was a failure of execution, and it bothered her. "You should know when you're beaten," she told him. Her tone was not cruel, merely factual. It was a piece of advice she would have given any junior executive. He looked at her, and the emptiness in his eyes was replaced by something else. Something ancient and weary. "There are some things you can't buy," he said. His voice was quiet, without inflection. "You just rent them for a while." He walked past her and out into the fading afternoon light, leaving her with the scent of sawdust and the unsettling feeling that she had not won at all. She had just made the first payment on a debt she did not understand. The town was called Harmony Creek, a name that felt like a cruel joke. Evelyn's car, a sleek German sedan that hummed with quiet power, had refused to start. A wire, the local mechanic had explained with a slow drawl, had been chewed through by something. A marmot, maybe. He could get the part. In a few days. She was stranded. Her associate had already returned to the city. Her assistant, Jenna, had booked her a room at the town's only motel, a place with a flickering neon sign and the faint smell of bleach. Evelyn stood on the cracked pavement, her phone pressed to her ear. Marcus Vance was on the other end, his voice smooth and reassuring. "A minor delay, Evelyn, don't worry. The important thing is the land is secure. Our preliminary surveys can begin next week." His confidence was irritating. He saw the world as a series of objectives to be met. In that, they were alike. But Marcus lacked finesse. He saw the map, not the territory. "I want to know why the price was so high," she said, cutting him off. "Who was the other bidder? I need a full workup on him." "Cal Blackwood." There was a brief pause. "Blackwood? The name means nothing to me. Probably just a local with an inflated sense of history. It's handled, Evelyn. That's what matters." Evelyn disconnected the call. Marcus was too eager, too quick to dismiss the details. Her father had always told her that fortunes were not lost in the grand collapse, but in the unexamined details. She decided to walk. The town was small, a single main street bracketed by forested hills. She needed to understand the environment she was now, however temporarily, a part of. An ecosystem had its own rules. To operate within it, one had to understand them. Her walk led her past a small park with a rusted swing set. A child was there, a little girl with dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She was drawing in a sketchbook, her brow furrowed in concentration. As Evelyn passed, a gust of wind caught the pages of the sketchbook, lifting a loose sheet and sending it tumbling across the dry grass. The paper came to rest against the toe of Evelyn's expensive leather shoe. She bent to pick it up. The drawing was of a tree, not just any tree, but a specific one, rendered with a child's earnest precision. It had a thick, gnarled trunk and one branch that reached out like a crooked arm. It was a good drawing. It had character. The little girl ran over, her expression anxious. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. "You're a very talented artist," Evelyn said, handing the paper back. The words were automatic, a social lubricant she rarely used. "My dad taught me," the girl said, clutching the drawing. "He says you have to look at what's really there, not just the shape of things." A man's voice called out from the edge of the park. "Maya, time to go." Evelyn looked up. It was him. Cal Blackwood, the man from the auction. He walked toward them, his long strides eating up the ground. He moved with an athlete's economy, a quiet grace that seemed at odds with his work-worn appearance. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze falling on Evelyn. That flat, unreadable look was back. His daughter Maya ran to him. "Dad, this lady found my drawing." Cal Blackwood's eyes flickered from Evelyn to the paper in his daughter's hand. He nodded once, acknowledging a fact. "We should go, Maya," he said. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. The girl looked up at Evelyn. "My name is Maya. What's yours?" Before Evelyn could answer, her father spoke. "Her name doesn't matter." The words were not unkind. They were a statement of fact. In their world, she was an outsider, a transient force. Her name, her identity, had no relevance. He turned and led his daughter away. Evelyn watched them go, the man and the small girl who saw things as they really were. She felt a strange sense of dislocation. In her world, her name was everything. It was a key, a weapon, a shield. Here, it was nothing. Later that day, driven by a gnawing curiosity she refused to name, she looked him up. The town's public library had a slow, wheezing internet connection. Cal Blackwood. The search results were sparse at first. Local records, property deeds, then a deeper search, using the powerful subscription services of Reed Global, yielded a ghost. Calvin Blackwood, Esquire, formerly a senior litigator for one of the top environmental law firms in the country. He had been a star, a crusader. His name was attached to a landmark case against a chemical company. He had won, an impossible victory. Then, 8 years ago, he had vanished. His wife, Elara Blackwood, an investigative journalist, had died. A car accident on a mountain road, a single-vehicle incident. Ruled accidental. Shortly after, Cal Blackwood had resigned from his firm, given up his license, and disappeared from public life. He had come here, to Harmony Creek, the place his family had lost generations ago. He worked as a carpenter, a furniture maker. Evelyn stared at the screen. The man in the dusty boots, the quiet father in the park, had been a legal shark of the highest order. He had faced down corporate giants and won. He had not been bidding on sentiment. He had been bidding on strategy. She had not simply outbid a local farmer for a piece of his family's history. She had engaged an opponent whose skill set was as sharp and dangerous as her own. And he wanted that land for a reason. The realization landed with a cold, hard weight in her stomach. Her phone rang. It was Jenna, her voice tight with urgency. "Evelyn, there's a problem. A big one. An injunction has been filed against the Blackwoods Hollow acquisition." "On what grounds?" Evelyn asked, her mind already racing. "Environmental endangerment. Citing a protected species of salamander that supposedly lives in the creek beds. The filing is immaculate, Jenna said. Airtight, it cites precedents I've never even heard of. It will tie us up in court for months, maybe years. Evelyn knew, with absolute certainty, who had filed it. He had lost the auction. So he had changed the battlefield, and he had just made his opening move. Marcus Vance was furious. His voice crackled over the phone, stripped of its usual polished charm. This is a disaster, Evelyn, a simple land acquisition. How did you let this happen? Our timelines, our investors, it's being handled, Marcus, she said, her voice calm. The contrast seemed to infuriate him more. Handled? This isn't some backroom deal. This is a legal nightmare. This Blackwood character. Who the hell is he? He came out of nowhere. He's a ghost, Evelyn thought, but she did not say it. He's a local with a grudge. I'll deal with it. You'd better. This project is my legacy at the company. It's your father's legacy. I will not have it derailed by some hick lawyer playing games. If you can't handle it, I will. The threat was clear. After the call, Evelyn sat in the sterile quiet of her motel room. The injunction was a masterpiece of legal maneuvering. It was designed not just to delay, but to bleed. It would force Reed Global to spend millions on environmental impact studies, expert testimony, and legal fees before they could even think about breaking ground. Cal Blackwood was not trying to win. He was trying to make the cost of victory too high. It was brilliant. And it was personal. There was something else on the call that bothered her. Marcus had mentioned her father. It's your father's legacy. Her father had built Reed Global from nothing, but he had been a conservative businessman. The lithium project, with its high risks and aggressive expansion, was entirely Marcus's vision. His attempt to link it to her father's memory felt false, manipulative. A message pinged on her encrypted work phone. It was from Jenna. Something's not right. The initial geological surveys for the mine, Marcus commissioned them from a new firm, not our usual guys. They're called Vantage Geological. Can't find much on them. It's a shell. Evelyn stared at the message. Vantage, Vance. It was clumsy. Arrogant. Another message came through. A single file attached. This was buried deep in the archives. A preliminary prospectus for a development project near Harmony Creek. From 10 years ago. Your father personally shut it down. The project manager was a junior executive named Marcus Vance. Evelyn opened the file. The project was for a chemical processing plant. The proposed location was adjacent to Blackwood's Hollow. The internal reports warned of a high risk of groundwater contamination. Her father had scrawled a single note in the margin in his familiar red ink. Reckless, bury it. Marcus had not just resurrected a project. He had lied about its origins. He was using the lithium mine as a cover for something else. Something her father had deemed too dangerous to pursue. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture she did not want to see. Her car was finally repaired the next morning. The mechanic handed her the keys and the chewed wire in a small plastic bag. A souvenir, he said with a grin. As she was about to leave town, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up beside her. Two men in dark suits got out. They were not from Harmony Creek. They moved with the stiff, purposeful gait of corporate security. Mr. Vance sent us, the lead man said. He's concerned for your safety. We're here to escort you back to the city. It was not a request. The men were an extension of Marcus's will. They were a message. I'm in control. Evelyn looked from the men to the quiet street. She thought of Cal Blackwood's unreadable eyes. She thought of the injunction. She thought of her father's red ink. She was a player in a game where she no longer understood the rules or the stakes. And Marcus Vance had just shown his hand. He believed she was an asset to be managed, a risk to be contained. I'm not going with you, she said. The man's expression did not change, but a flicker of something hard passed through his eyes. "That's not a good idea, Miss Reed." A pickup truck, old and dented, pulled up behind the SUV, blocking it in. Cal Blackwood got out. He did not look at the men. He looked at Evelyn. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. His voice was calm, conversational, but it carried across the pavement, cutting through the tension. "This is a private matter," the suit said, turning to face him. "This is a public street," Blackwood replied. He leaned against the fender of his truck, crossing his arms. He looked relaxed. Patient, he looked like he could wait all day. The two men exchanged a look. They were city muscle. They were accustomed to intimidation and implied threat. They were not equipped for a man who refused to be intimidated, a man who clearly had nothing to lose. They got back in their SUV. After a moment, the vehicle pulled away, its tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. Evelyn and Cal Blackwood were left alone in the sudden quiet. The silence stretched. It was not awkward. It was heavy with unspoken questions. "You filed the injunction," she said. It was not an accusation. "Yes. Why?" He looked away from her, his gaze fixed on the forested ridge that bordered the town. "My wife is buried up there, on a piece of land that's been in my family for 200 years. Your company wants to dig a tunnel under her grave. I won't let that happen." The quiet finality of his words struck her with more force than any shouted threat. This was not about money or land value. It was about something sacred. "My father shut down the original project," she found herself saying. "The chemical plant." He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "He knew it was dangerous," she continued. "He buried the report. Marcus Vance dug it up." "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because those men were not sent to protect me. They were sent to contain me, and I need to know what Marcus is so afraid of me finding out." He studied her face for a long time. She felt as if he were reading every carefully constructed defense she had ever built. "You bought the wrong piece of land," he said finally, "and now you're standing on it." A phone call that night shattered the fragile truce. It was Marcus. His voice was cold, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I know you're still in that town, Evelyn. I know you spoke with Blackwood. Let me be perfectly clear. Drop this, come back to the city. Sign the proxies I've sent over. Let me handle the project. If you don't, things will become difficult. For you, for anyone who helps you." The line went dead. The threat was no longer implied. It was a declaration of war. He was moving to seize control of the company, of her father's legacy. He would use the board, the investors, anything he could to force her out. She was isolated. Her corporate allies would fall in line behind Marcus. He was promising them the kind of profits that erased all loyalty. Her communication was monitored. Her resources were being cut off. She was sitting in her car on the edge of town as darkness fell, the dashboard lights casting a sterile glow. She had nowhere to go. Returning to the city was walking into an ambush. Staying at the motel was waiting to be found. Headlights swept across her windshield. It was Cal Blackwood's truck. He pulled up alongside her. He did not get out. He simply rolled down his window. "They're watching the roads," he said. "And the motel. How do you know? This is a small town. We notice things that don't belong." He was right. She was a liability to him, a danger to his daughter. "I should leave," she said. "Where will you go?" he asked. It was a practical question. She had no answer. He was silent for a moment, his profile outlined against the deep blue of the twilight. "Follow me," he said. He led her away from the town, down a series of winding, unpaved roads that her sedan was not designed for. The forest pressed in on either side, the trees forming a dense, dark canopy. They came to a stop in a small clearing in front of a house. It was not a large house. It was built of wood and stone, with a wide porch and smoke curling from a chimney. It looked as if it had grown out of the hillside. It felt solid. Real, his daughter, Maya, was waiting on the porch swing. She waved. "You can stay in the workshop," he said, gesturing to a separate building a short distance from the house. "It's warm. No one will find you there." Evelyn looked from the house to the dark woods surrounding them. "Why are you helping me?" He met her gaze. His eyes were like the forest at dusk, full of shadows and hidden depths. "You're the enemy of my enemy," he said. "For now, that's enough." The workshop smelled of cedar shavings and linseed oil. It was a large, open space, filled with hand tools arranged with surgical precision on the walls. Half-finished furniture stood like sculptures in the low light, a chair with an elegantly curved back, a chest of drawers with intricate joinery. It was a place of quiet, focused creation, a world away from the destructive consumption that fueled her own life. Cal brought her a tray with a bowl of soup and a thick slice of bread. The soup was simple, made with vegetables from a garden she could see from the window. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackle of the wood stove and the sigh of the wind in the pines. "Elara, my wife," he began, his voice low. "She was a journalist, an honest one. She grew up here. She knew these woods, this water. When the first rumors of the development project started 10 years ago, she began digging." "The chemical plant," Evelyn said. He nodded. She found out what they were planning, the chemicals they would use. She knew the geology of this area. The limestone is like a sponge. Any leak would poison the groundwater for 100 miles. It would be irreversible. He paused, his gaze distant. She got a source inside Reed Global, someone who was horrified by the plan. They gave her internal documents, the real environmental assessments, not the sanitized ones they were preparing for the EPA. "Your father knew?" "Yes." Elara contacted him directly. She laid out the evidence. To his credit, he listened. He saw the truth. He killed the project. He also fired the man who was pushing it. Marcus Vance. Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Vance's animosity was not just about corporate ambition. It was about a decade-old humiliation, a thirst for revenge against her father, now transferred to her. But Vance was patient, Cal continued. He worked his way back in. After your father passed, he saw his chance. He repackaged the project, called it a lithium mine, a clean, green venture. But the goal was the same. The access corridor he needs you to secure, it leads directly to the old proposed site. The mine is just a pretext. What about the evidence Elara had? The documents. It disappeared after she died. The police report said her car went off the road. A brake failure. I was a lawyer, Evelyn. I know how to read a police report. This one was clean. Too clean. The state trooper who wrote it retired to a very comfortable life in Florida a month later. He fell silent. The pain in the room was a physical presence. It was the ghost of a life that had been stolen. He believes the documents are still out there, Evelyn realized, and he thinks they're on that land. Blackwood's Hollow, that's what he's afraid of. Cal looked at her, his expression grim. That's what he's willing to kill for. The next morning, Maya appeared at the workshop door. She held out a small folded piece of paper. "It's for you," she said. Evelyn unfolded it. It was another drawing. This time, it was of a woman with dark hair, standing next to the gnarled tree from the park. The woman was smiling. It was a hesitant, unfamiliar expression, but it was unmistakably her. The child's simple act of acceptance, of seeing her not as a corporate raider or a threat, but just as a person, struck a crack in the armor Evelyn had worn for years. She spent the day in the workshop, a strange calm settling over her. She watched Cal work. He moved with a quiet confidence, his hands shaping the wood with a knowledge that seemed instinctual. He did not rush. He let the material dictate the pace. "Land doesn't rush," he told her once, his hands smoothing a piece of maple. "You have to listen to it." She began to see the world through his eyes, a world of patience, of substance, of things that were built to last. It was a world that made her own feel hollow and transient. That evening, an old man with a face like a weathered map appeared at the house. This was Silas Croft, a name Evelyn recognized from the old county property records. His family had lived in Harmony Creek longer than the Blackwoods. Cal introduced them. Silas looked at Evelyn with shrewd, knowing eyes. "Heard you bought the hollow," he said, his voice raspy with age. "Stirred up a hornet's nest, you did." He and Cal spoke for a long time on the porch. Evelyn could not hear their words, but she could see the gravity of their conversation in their posture, in the slow, deliberate way they moved. When Silas left, Cal came into the workshop. He was holding a small, oilskin-wrapped package. Silas's father was the town clerk for 50 years, Cal said. He kept his own records. He didn't trust banks or governments. He trusted dirt and ink. He placed the package on the workbench and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound ledger and a single, yellowed envelope. The ledger contained handwritten entries of land transfers, water rights, and mineral claims going back a century. But it was the envelope that held their attention. The postmark was dated 2 days before Elara Blackwood's death. It was addressed to Silas's father. The return address was Elara's reporting office. Cal opened it with unsteady hands. Inside was a single key, a key to a safe deposit box, and a handwritten note. "If anything happens to me, give this to Cal. He'll know what to do. The original files are safe." And I made a copy. Cal's breath hitched. He sank onto a nearby stool, his face pale. "A copy of what?" Evelyn asked gently. He looked up, his eyes burning with a cold fire she had not seen before. The one thing that could prove it was murder, a sworn deposition. The source from Reed Global, the one who gave her the original documents. He was an engineer. He knew Vance had been cutting corners, faking reports. He was afraid. Elara convinced him to go on the record. "She recorded it. Where is it?" He thought for a moment, his legal mind re-engaging, processing the new information. She was smart. She would have put it somewhere Vance would never think to look. Somewhere public, but hidden in plain sight. His eyes met Evelyn's. "The library," he whispered. "The Harmony Creek Public Library." She endowed a collection of local history books in her family's name the week before she died. It was a plan born of desperation and fueled by a shared, unspoken purpose. Evelyn still had her skills, her knowledge of the corporate world. Cal had the local knowledge and the legal mind. Together, they were formidable. First, she needed to talk to Jenna. She used a burner phone Cal provided, routing the call through a series of encrypted servers. "Jenna, I need you to do something for me," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Do not do it from the office. Go to a public terminal. I need you to call an emergency board meeting. Use the bylaws, the clause for a vote of no confidence." "A vote of no confidence?" Jenna's voice was shocked. "Evelyn, Marcus has the votes. He's been promising them the moon." "I know. The meeting isn't to win. It's to get him in a room. All of them. In person. Tell them I have a new proposal for the Harmony Creek project, one that will be far more profitable. It was a lure. Marcus's greed was his greatest weakness. The prospect of even greater profits would be irresistible. He would want to be there to personally crush her, to savor his victory. While Jenna set the trap in the city, Evelyn and Cal went to the library. It was a small, quiet building that smelled of dust and time. The librarian, a woman with kind eyes and a soft voice, recognized Cal immediately. "The Alara Blackwood collection," she said, leading them to a small alcove. It was her passion project. She wanted to make sure our history wasn't forgotten. The collection consisted of 2 shelves of old, leather-bound books. Town histories, family journals, geological surveys from the 19th century. "It has to be here," Cal murmured, his fingers tracing the spines of the books. They searched for an hour. Nothing. No hidden compartments. No loose pages. Evelyn stepped back, trying to see the problem from a different angle. Elara was a journalist, a storyteller. She dealt in information. How would she hide a digital file in a collection of analog books? She looked at the titles again. Most were straightforward. A history of Harmony Creek, the flora and fauna of the Blue Ridge. But one stood out. It was a thin volume with a simple hand-tooled leather cover. The title was stamped in faded gold leaf, "Blackwood's Hollow, a Survey." Evelyn pulled it from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. She opened it. The pages were filled with detailed, hand-drawn maps of the property, geological cross-sections, and notes on the water table. It was a meticulous, scientific study of the land. Cal looked over her shoulder. "This was my great-grandfather's. He was a surveyor. I don't understand. Elara must have added it to the collection." Evelyn ran her hand along the inside of the back cover. She felt a slight ridge, a seam that was almost invisible. Using her nail, she carefully pried it open. Tucked into a hollowed-out space was a small, silver data drive. They took it back to the workshop and plugged it into Evelyn's laptop. There was only one file on the drive, an audio recording. A man's voice, nervous and strained, filled the quiet space. "My name is Arthur Finch. I am a geotechnical engineer at Reed Global. I am making this recording on." For the next hour, they listened as the engineer detailed, with painstaking precision, how Marcus Vance had ordered him to falsify data to bury reports, to declare the proposed chemical plant site safe when he knew it was a catastrophic risk. He said no one would ever know. Finch's voice trembled. He said Mr. Reed was an old man who had lost his nerve. He said it was the future. Then Elara's voice came on the recording, calm and clear. "And you believe he was aware that a significant leak was not a risk, but a certainty?" "A certainty," Finch confirmed. "It was just a matter of when." He called it an acceptable operational cost. The recording ended. The air in the workshop was thick and heavy. This was it, the smoking gun. It was not just proof of corporate malfeasance, it was a motive for murder. Finch had disappeared shortly after Elara's death, presumed to have left the country. Vance had tied up every loose end. Or so he thought. Evelyn looked at Cal. His face was a mask of grief and cold, controlled rage. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "we end this." The boardroom at Reed Global was on the 50th floor. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, with a view that stretched across the entire city. It was a place designed to make people feel small. Evelyn had never felt smaller, or more powerful. She stood at the head of the long, polished table. Marcus Vance sat at the opposite end, a smug, proprietary smile on his face. The other board members, men and women she had known for years, avoided her gaze. They had already chosen their side. Cal stood by the door, a silent, watchful presence. He wore a simple dark suit she had bought for him in a neighboring town. He did not look like a carpenter. He looked like the lawyer he had once been. A man prepared for battle. "Let's begin," Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. "Evelyn, we've all read your pre-circulated proposal. A wildlife sanctuary? A charitable trust? It's a lovely, sentimental gesture. But we are not a charity. We are here to create value for our shareholders." He had the votes. He knew it. This was his coronation. "My father," Evelyn began, her voice quiet but carrying in the acoustically perfect room, "built this company on a single principle, that our work should leave the world better than we found it. He believed that our name, the Reed name, should be a synonym for integrity." A few of the older board members shifted uncomfortably. They remembered her father. They remembered that version of the company. "Your father was a great man," Marcus said, his tone laced with condescension. "But he was from a different era. The world has changed." "Some things don't change," Evelyn said. "The bedrock, the water that runs through it, the truth." She looked directly at Marcus. 10 years ago, my father shut down a project near Harmony Creek, a chemical plant. He shut it down because it was reckless, dangerous, and built on a foundation of lies. The man responsible for those lies was you, Marcus. Marcus laughed. A short, sharp bark. "This is ancient history. Desperate, baseless accusations." "Is it?" Evelyn asked. She nodded to Cal. Cal pressed a button on a small remote. Arthur Finch's voice filled the boardroom. Frightened, shaky, undeniably real. "My name is Arthur Finch. I am a geotechnical engineer at Reed Global." The color drained from Marcus's face. He stared at Evelyn, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury. The recording played on, every word a nail in his coffin. The falsified data, the buried reports, the chilling phrase, "an acceptable operational cost." When it finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Evelyn let the silence hang for a long moment. Then she spoke. The woman who recorded that deposition, the journalist who was about to expose him, was Elara Blackwood. She died in a car accident 2 days later. The star witness, Arthur Finch, disappeared, and the state trooper who ruled her death an accident retired on a salary he could not possibly have afforded. She placed the small silver data drive on the polished table. It slid to a stop in the exact center. This drive, along with a full copy of the recording and supporting evidence, has been delivered to the district attorney's office and the SEC. The Harmony Creek project is over. The only question left for this board is whether Reed Global will be a co-conspirator in Marcus Vance's crimes or its primary victim. She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each board member. They were no longer looking at Marcus. They were looking at her. The first one to speak was an old man who had served on the board with her father for 30 years. "I move for the immediate termination of Marcus Vance. For cause," he said, his voice firm, "and the suspension of all operations related to the Harmony Creek site pending a full, independent investigation." "Seconded," another voice said. All in favor. A forest of hands went up. It was unanimous. Marcus Vance sat frozen, his face a mask of ruin. 2 security guards entered the room, the same men he had sent to intimidate Evelyn. They walked to his chair. He did not seem to see them. He was staring at Cal, a look of pure, venomous hatred in his eyes. Cal met his gaze without flinching. His expression was not one of triumph. It was one of profound, weary finality. Justice, delivered at last. The aftermath was a controlled whirlwind. Evelyn worked with the board to unwind Marcus's schemes. She established a foundation in Elara Blackwood's name, dedicated to funding investigative journalism and environmental protection. The first act of the foundation was to purchase Blackwood's Hollow and turn it into a protected nature preserve, forever wild and undeveloped. She liquidated her father's company, selling off the divisions piece by piece to responsible buyers, ensuring the employees were protected. She dismantled the empire he had built, because she knew he would have done the same. He had built it on integrity, and when that was gone, it was just a shell. She sold her apartment in the city, the penthouse that overlooked the world she had once sought to conquer. She kept only a few personal belongings, a photograph of her father, a handful of books, and a child's drawing of a woman smiling under a gnarled tree. 3 months later, she drove back to Harmony Creek. The town looked the same, but she saw it differently now. She saw the strength in its quiet streets, the resilience in its old buildings. She drove down the familiar, unpaved road to Cal's house. He was out front, repairing a section of fence that bordered the property. He worked with the same steady, unhurried rhythm she remembered. He saw her car, but did not stop what he was doing. He simply watched her approach. She got out of the car and walked over to him. She did not know what to say. The usual words, the currency of her old life, felt useless here. Maya came running out of the house, a wide smile on her face. She hugged Evelyn's legs. "I knew you'd come back," she said. Cal finally straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at Evelyn. There were no questions in his eyes, only a quiet recognition. "I brought you something," Evelyn said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small framed document. It was the original deed to Blackwood's Hollow from 1888. The name on it was Silas Blackwood. She had found it in the county archives. She had used the last of her corporate influence to have the title legally and irrevocably restored to his family line. She held it out to him. He took it, his fingers brushing against hers. It was the first time they had touched. A spark, small and warm, passed between them. He looked at the name on the deed, then back at her. A slow, genuine smile transformed his face. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It reached his eyes, chasing away the last of the shadows. "Welcome home," he said. She stood there with him and his daughter as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was cool and smelled of pine. She looked at the fence line, a simple structure of wood and wire that separated one place from another. Some fences mark where land ends, others mark where it begins.